When we look at the whole field of mindfulness, all the different ways that mindfulness is taught and so forth, by different lineages, teachers, in general, we can classify the focus methods in terms of are they just letting the attention sort of go wherever it goes? I call that free floating. And then, being aware where it is going. Are they saying, okay, we're going to systematically sort of scroll through the possibilities and then start again? I call that inventory. Or are we going to try to cover all the possibilities at once? I call that even coverage. Easiest to understand with regards to the body, but can be generalized to any sensory experience. I have a technique that I call noting body locations. So here the categories are body locations, and it's just, okay, let your attention go wherever it wants to go, and note knee, face, stomach. Probably, 95% of the people in this room have done that with me upon occasion. Well, I would say that's a free-floating strategy. You just sort of, as it comes up, yes, you can exercise some control, but it's basically what pulls you. And the elements here are the various locations of sensation. By way of contrast, a systematic inventory is, okay, we're going to go through the body part by part and sample what's there, and then maybe repeat that cycle, which could be done in any one of dozens of ways. You could go sort of like band by band, or you could go like, let's take the right leg, the left leg, the right arm, the left arm, or if you want to be fancy and get down to really subtle levels of sensation and really subtle levels of flow, you can attempt to continuously sweep the awareness either over the surface of the body or even like a CAT scan right through the body. That can be up and down, right to left, left to right, front to back, back to front. That's a continuous inventory. And you can even get fancier if you want. You can go in spirals. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, make a continuous inventory of the body. By way of contrast to that, okay, hold all the locations simultaneously in awareness. Even coverage, I call it. The advantage to the systematic inventory is that it makes sure you cover everything, and so it brings a lot of sensitization and a lot of detail. The disadvantage might be that there's not much to detect, but of course if you have the categories of restful states, then you can detect the absences of presence. But sometimes people that do the body sweeping sort of get lost because they can't detect sensations. That can be a possible difficulty with that. Even coverage is sort of at the opposite end. It integrates and gives you the big picture. And ultimately, since sensory events do tend to spread, it's good to be able to cover large pieces of sensory experience, to have the ability to do that. Most people, if you say the word concentration, they assume it implies a narrowing of attention. But Sasaki Roshi is adamant that there's two flavors of concentration, not surprisingly. Contractive, where you restrict the range of focus, and expansive, where you get a flavor of being highly concentrated precisely because you're holding all parts of a large object, either at once or, more or less at once. So the even coverage builds that flavor, and it gives you the big picture, and it leads to integrations. Things have to be integrated before they can be annihilated, and their annihilation takes them to their source. So that's the there's something to be said for the even coverage, but it's challenging because like you lose contact with pieces and so forth. So my language for even coverage is, hold it as broadly as you can without straining. Typically, I'll say something like that. Okay, so the advantage now to the free float is it's natural. It's not as hard work as the inventory or the even coverage. And people can typically do it right away and find it more fun than the other two, I would say, typically. I don't know that there's any disadvantage to it specifically that I can't think of right offhand. But that would be briefly some sort of to compare and contrast the strategies. Or let's say focus in, focus out, and focus on rest are based on a free floating in general. However, remember, even when you're free floating, you are allowed to zoom out. So those are sort of brief moments of even coverage, if you like zoom out to fill touch space or something. So there is, in the zoom in, zoom out option, there's like brief sort of coverage available. But essentially in focus in, focus out, and focus on rest, you're free floating among the categories. And if more than one is present, you're just choosing one. In focus on change, when you're noting flow, you are not making distinctions between where the flow is at all. I mean, you're not intentionally making distinctions. So it's wherever the flow is, meaning if the flow infects somatic, visual, and auditory, and at the moment of when you note flow, you elect to zoom out, you are doing the ultimate even coverage. You're covering all sensory spaces at once. So it fits in there. I use systematic inventories during special exercises, actually quite a bit. Now, focus on positive, you do evenly cover whichever one, two, or all three of the spaces that you're doing. You can attempt to hold the positive in all three at once if you want. Or you can sort of, sort of hold it in all three, but not work too hard, and it sort of free floats, but it's always, going to positive in any one of them. You could do it as a kind of free float, or you could do it as an even coverage strategy. In general, it's divide and conquer, right? So if you're trying to work with a big piece of experience and you can't, then you work with smaller stuff. So if you're trying an even coverage and it doesn't work, then try free floating, or probably better still, systematic inventory, and then you can build to coverage. Okay, good.